obedience to authority, just say no. You may recall the famous experiments on obedience to authority done in the early 1960s. Stanley Milgram, with his research, demonstrated just how terrible ordinary people could be when instructed by figures of authority. Those who volunteered for the experiments were told to administer a test to a subject who was through a window in another room. Each time the subject answered incorrectly, the volunteer was told to give him an increasingly strong electric shock. Many volunteers continued to administer the shocks even when the subject screamed in pain, complained of heart trouble, begged them to stop, and stopped making any noise at all, presumably because he was unconscious or dead. They did this because someone in a lab coat told them to, and perhaps reassured them that they were just doing their job. The subject was an actor, which is irrelevant since the volunteers didn't know this. This kind of reflexive respect for authority is clearly present throughout history. Naturally, we like to think that we would be different, that we would have just said no to authorities like Stalin or Hitler if it meant hurting others. Of course, if on a daily basis we reflexively respect the law without considering whether it is right or not, we are likely as normal as those in Milgram's experiments, or the millions who participated in what the Nazis did. The people who helped Hitler were not monsters, nor are those with the potential to do such things most of humanity. People are what they are, which includes potential for good and not so good actions. Fortunately, we are not often put in a position to demonstrate our capacity to do great evil. But it is there, especially when we obey authority without thinking. Just say no to obedience to authority. I don't advocate disobeying authority just to disobey. There is no need to break every law you feel is unfair either. But we can each use the mind we have, and accept responsibility for our own actions, regardless of what those in power say. We can overcome our automatic obedience to authority, and even our automatic respect and fear. As for myself, I obey most laws, even many that I think are unjust or just plain stupid. I obey good laws because I want to do what is right. I obey bad laws because I'm not willing to pay the price of violating them. On the other hand, if the issue is important enough, or if the cost is low enough, I'll break any law I think is unjust. If I were an escaped slave illegally seeking shelter in this country 150 years ago, I would hope that someone would do the same. In case you think I am hedging on this issue, let me be very clear. You and I have no duty to obey or respect the law, none at all. With the slightest bit of imagination we all can think of a scenario where we would gladly break the law. We clearly value our own moral values above any duty to obey laws, at least in our hearts and minds. Incidentally, I don't advocate pretending we are above the law. That kind of pomposity is for law and order types who secretly break the law. Consider, for example, the tens of millions of good citizens who have used an illegal drug sometime in their lives, yet still favor laws to imprison drug users. Such hypocrites don't plan to turn themselves into the police, naturally. After all, they were mature enough to use illegal drugs, but other inferior beings need to be punished. Actually, those who have broken any law they truly think is just should probably do the noble thing and turn themselves in. But what if you believe a law is unjust? I still wouldn't think I am above it, because I am above all advocating being practical about these things. Break unfair laws, I say, if your morality demands it or allows it. But be ready to pay the consequences and/or do what is necessary to avoid detection. Many laws are made for reasons that have nothing to do with protecting individuals, and sometimes we should break them. Disrespect for specific laws can bring about a better society, as with the civil disobedience that led to changes in racist laws in the past. We can see that as a triumph of respect for moral law over the laws of authority. Of course, there are good reasons to obey laws as well. Good laws are needed. Anarchy certainly doesn't lead to more freedom, but less. And even in the case of bad laws, We can follow along to avoid trouble, or if they are not too evil, with the idea that it is better to maintain order in society. However, contrary to what many may think, we never need unthinking obedience to authority. Society doesn't even need general respect for the law to be peaceful and good. Those in power want you to think such obedience and respect is needed, because they are afraid of those who do their own thinking. Perhaps fear of the consequences of breaking a law is needed at times, since not everyone will agree with what is a good or bad law, and a law without consequences is rather meaningless. But in any and all cases, isn't it better to cultivate respect for moral law and individual rights, rather than obedience to the often arbitrary laws of those in power? Let's just say no to any unthinking obedience to authority.
Copyright Steve Gilman. To learn how to have radical new thoughts, go now and subscribe to the free Radical Thinking course at www.radicalnewthoughts.com.